Hello guys and welcome back to DarkHorse FM. And if you've ever been in that scenario in Football Manager 2022 where you're constantly in the lead, you're controlling the game, and then all of a sudden just before the final whistle goes, the AI finds a way to magically somehow get the equalizer just before the game is over. I find it very frustrating. It happens a lot in FM 2022, and for some reason it has worked in my favor sometimes where I've gotten the late goal and it's been exciting, but more often than not I'm always at the end of that late equalizer. So in this video I'm going to share with you guys a little bit from research how you can actually solve that problem and get your team to see out games and win those games, and then you don't have to concede those late goals in the 90 or 89th minute. The first thing you want to do is to alter your team's mentality. More often than not, if you're using the positive mentality in Football Manager 2022 and then you've gone all the way to score 1 or 2 goals, and then, or let's say you're leading 1-0, let's use a very tricky situation like you're leading 1-0. Once it gets closer to the 73rd, 74th minute in the game, it's possible that you can try and shift the mentality to a more defensive mentality. Now, a cautious mentality I've noticed in FM 2022 tends to invite pressure from the opposition and try and allow them come on to you and give them a lot more chances, and then it stops your team from trying to get ahead. But it's a tricky way with mentality in the sense that you don't only have to switch the team's mentality, you also have to switch the player roles to match that mentality, and we're going to get to that in the second tip. Now, first and foremost, I would advise that you use a very defensive mentality as opposed to the cautious mentality, because the cautious mentality still allows your team to get forward when the opposition presents itself, but when you're trying to see out a game, when you're trying to close down that victory, using an ultra defensive mentality is very useful. And then, like, we go into the second tip. As I mentioned in the second tip, you're going to want to, after you've gotten the mentality locked down to a very defensive mentality or a defensive mentality, you're going to swap the player roles and then take away all the advanced roles like the mezzala or the trequartista, or those players that don't really defend that much. And then you're going to want to include a bit more defensive mentality, a bit more defensive roles or solid, powerful roles in your team's setup, like a box-to-box midfielder or a ball-winning midfielder, and then have some players play on defensive roles. If you have your fullbacks on attack DT, if you have your wingbacks on attack DT, it's also recommended that you switch them to a support mentality or a defensive mentality. Ideally, you want to have a lot more support mentality players in your side when you're trying to defend the lead, as these players obviously look to get back and try and close down spaces and then try and mark the opposition, and when the opportunity to get forward actually presents itself, they will think about it and then find a way to get forward and hit the opposition on the counter attack. So you tend to have more players on support and defend DT when you're trying to defend the lead. The third tip I want you to do is to have an alternative tactic. Like if you have a 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1 system or a narrow 4-3-3 system in your tactic, you need to have an alternative tactic that is slightly more defensive than the first one. So if you have a unique tactic that tends to work for you in attack, you're going to need to design an identical or somewhat identical tactic from the first one and then make it a bit more cautious and a bit more defensive, and then use that tactic when you're going into the latter stages of the game and then your players are getting tired. It's going to be a tactic that's going to involve a lower defensive line, a lower shape, using the regroup instruction or the retain shape instruction rather than counter and counter pressing instructions. This can actually help you see out the game better and then stop you from losing possession. Now, there is an interesting website where I actually did the research for these tips, and you can find it. I'm going to attach a link in the description, by the way, so you can go and read the detailed breakdown of how you can actually stop conceding goals in Football Manager. It was written by The Playmaker, and that's the name of the website, The Playmaker. It's actually interesting. He does amazing Football Manager write-ups, Football Manager tips and content like that, so you can check out the website. I'm going to attach the link in the description down below. The next tip is closely linked to the third one that I mentioned, and that is to include safe instructions. Like I mentioned, you're going to swap your player roles from the attacking mezzala roles to a more cautious defensive roles that you can have in your tactic, and that is going to help you retain or help you defend better. The next tip is actually use safe instructions. What you're going to do is actually take off the more direct passing, take off the extremely high tempo, because these instructions, they will help you get goals, but when you've gotten the goal and then you want to try and see out the victory, they will also help you lose possession a lot. So you're going to have to drop those team instructions all the way back, lower your team's intensity, lower your passing directness and of some sorts, and then try and play safe, waste time if possible. There's an instruction in Football Manager that actually enables you waste a lot of time, so you can turn that up and it can actually help you see out the game as well. This next tip is more of is more involved with team dynamics. You're going to want to look at your team hierarchy and then check which of your players are the big personality players and the big leaders in the team. And then you'd notice that in some cases, your big personality players, your big leaders in your dressing room are not the best players in your team, so they'll ideally not be the ones starting the games. But when you've already gotten your point and then you're trying to get 3 points in the game and then you scored your goal already and you're trying to see off the game, it's interesting. You can actually bring on these big personality players, a lot like James Milner in Liverpool anyway, and then you can bring on those big personality players and then they can help you see out the game. You can have them play in the center of midfield, play as a deep line playmaker on support duty as well, or on defend duty like I mentioned, and then you can actually have those players come into the game and then see out those victories, and they can help you a great deal if you have those big personality players that are much like model professional big personality players, like idealists, those perfectionist kind of players in your team. And then once you have those players, the leaders in the team, highly influential players that are not the fastest, that are not, those players that can actually not run a yard or so, but they are very good when you're in tight scenarios and that you want to try and see off a victory. Bringing those players on can actually help you get the result or get over the line in that game. The next tip is also in-game tip, and then you can check your players that are actually getting tired, and this is in reference to your midfielders and then your defenders, or the fullbacks I mean. So those players tend to run a lot in the game, and then you notice that towards the end of the game they are probably getting tired. You're going to want to swap those players for fresh legs and then bring them into the team, and then while you have all the defensive mentality all set up in place, these players can actually help you see out that game because they have the legs to actually outrun the opposition. Even in attack, you're going to notice that the AI is trying so much to try and score goals. Towards the latter stages of the game, they're going to be a bit more advanced, they're going to be a bit more direct when they are trying to get a goal. That's your chance to actually go defensive and then have fast players with fresh legs in the attacking areas as well, so you can actually hit your position on the counter attack. The last tip for me, and I have to say this is probably the most important tip, and it's also the most underrated and then the most overlooked tip in this entire list, I have to admit. So what you're going to do now is to pay attention to your touchline shouts. Towards the ending period of the game, you do not actually have to berate your players, or if you're winning the game 1-0, and then even if you're playing against a team that is much weaker than you, and then it seems like the team are trying to come and try and score an equalizer or something, you don't need to berate your players or anything. You can actually encourage them to stay focused, or you can use the encouragement touchline shout, and also use, ask the players to stay focused. This is probably the most important one, because most of the time when I'm playing Football Manager, I tend to use berate and praise or demand more from my players all the time, but then the focus instruction actually helps you see out a game. So if you're using the focus touchline shout towards the ending period of the game, the players are going to tend to concentrate more and then be more aware of where the danger might be, and then they're going to be a bit more focused, and they will likely not concede that late goal. So guys, those are 7 things you can actually do in Football Manager that will stop you from conceding the late goal, and then you can actually go on to get your 3 points if you're playing against a team. This, by the way, this doesn't also work, or this doesn't always work when you're playing against a much bigger team like Manchester City or Liverpool or Arsenal, because Arsenal gives me a lot of problems in Football Manager. I don't know why, but this also happens when you're playing against mid-table sides like Norwich, Southampton, West Ham. West Ham are probably a much better team nowadays anyway, but Norwich and South, because it happened against Norwich, it happened against Southampton as well. What you're going to notice is that even this mid-table sides tend to, if they're losing, they're going to try and win the game. So they're going to get in a more advanced system and then play in a more attacking manner. So if you're not prepared defensively, you will likely concede the late goal. So what you have to do is apply these 7 tips that I just shared with you guys, and if you found them useful, let me know in the comment section as well. And you can try them for yourself if it actually worked out for you. So I'll catch you guys with more Football Manager tips like this, and just be careful when you're playing Football Manager. Try to apply these tips wherever you can, and you might actually go on to get your 3 points. So I'll catch you in the next video with more Football Manager tips like this. Remember to subscribe to the channel and leave a like for this video if you found it useful. I'll catch you guys in the next video.